I've been busy good.
All right.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for coming this morning. Jim's out of town. He's, I believe, in Seattle with family. Have Gene Theriault sharing with us this morning. Born and raised in North Pole, Mr. Theriault is a lifelong Alaskan who was elected to the Alaska House of Representatives in 1992 at the age of 32, filling a seat in the legislature for 17 years. During tenure in office, he was selected by his colleagues to serve 2 terms as co-chair of the House Finance Committee and 1 term as the president of the Alaska Senate. Following his time in elected office, Mr. Theriault was employed as a senior policy advisor on in-state energy in the governor's office. In that role, he worked closely with the governor and agency personnel on efforts to help Alaska navigate toward a more certain energy future. So thanks for sharing with us on that. And thing too, I did want to mention, and I mentioned this to Mr. Theriault, is that we do have Nick Simoniak sharing with us at the beginning of January on in-state options, AGDC. So we'll be about that in more detail as well later on.
Okay, and many of you may have remembered Nick Simoniak. He was an employee at ADA for a number of years and worked on the Interior Energy Project as a modeler. And so last January, he went over to AGDC, again, as a project modeler for them. He has been working with a lot of the in-state utilities as far as access to gas off of a pipeline that goes across the state. So certainly for Fairbanks, he brings a lot of the knowledge that he gained on the Interior Energy Project as far as existing demand, potential demand, things of that nature. And he takes that over to AGDC. So as far as them resource off of a potential pipeline for the community, his ADA serves him well on behalf of Fairbanks. See, how do I advance?
Either the clicking or that should work.
Scroll. Okay. This slide that I'm using this morning was used last Monday, a week ago Monday, for an update to the House Resources Committee. We have a statutory obligation to AGDC to give them product updates. They didn't before the legislature as frequently as we'd like to this summer just because of the ongoing special sessions. But we have one House and Senate Resources Committees about 2.5 months ago, and then with the recent action in the markets during the President's Asia trip, we had an opportunity to get back before House Resources. And so this packet was primarily developed for that. The montage of photos here are different interaction with potential Asian players, the federal administration through the summer and the fall, which a part of that led up to then the signing during the President's trip to Beijing. That center photo here, you can see President Trump and President Xi in the background. It was a very competitive process to be part of the President's trade. Even to the day or two before the actual signing ceremony, we were not sure whether it would actually be in the group of companies that documents were signed in front of the president, the 2 presidents of the country. So having continued to clear those hurdles as we got up to the actual day, things would be witnessed was certainly pleasing from the perspective of the Croatian Gas Pipeline Corporation. 3 after this signing, then there was another signing in Hanoi, Petro Vietnam, potential Asian customer, much smaller than certainly Petro China, but nonetheless important as far as showing people reviewing the project that there is an interest, a market interest in Asia for the product that would be produced here in Alaska. Just gives some very quick information on the project. Of course, we're talking about a gas treatment plant up in the North Slope, a large pipeline then across the state, down following the TAPS line, basically to the center of the state, and then diverting from the TAPS line and go down the highway to Anchorage, Sioux area, see a crossing of Cook Inlet, and then to the liquefaction plant near Nikiski. This is the main number, the primary numbers for the project that we're advancing at this time. It is 42-inch line, 20 metric tons per year of LNG, 20 metric tons per annum production. That's off of 3 trains. So basically, it's being developed in a 3-train configuration. So up on the North Slope, you have 3 trains of gas conditioning, then have the 42-inch line going across the state, and then potential for 3 trains of liquefaction that push that 20 million metric tons per year. Down the bottom, you can see the different cost components of that project. Number was estimated to cost between $45 and $65 billion when the 3 major producers were still involved in the project, and quite a bit of pre-FEED engineering. They were able to refine that number down to $43 billion. That's still a substantial amount of money. Certainly, it's a very large project. But you can see along across the bottom here the different components. You've got the gas treatment plant on the North Slope. You've got the pipeline, the LNG facility, and then on the far right, you've got these 2 bars, chunk costs that are shaded in gray. The first is owner's cost. That was a figure that was put in, again, when the major gas producers in the state of Alaska controlled the project. And that is a chunk of money that covers the management of the project. We have done some evaluation about what an average owner's cost is on a project of this size, and have determined that that number we think is a little bit rich. In addition, the $10 billion of contingency cost on top. Any large construction project, you want to have a chunk of potential contingency if you've got cost overruns. We think that with good engineering and working closely with an EPC contractor, there's an opportunity to potentially squeeze down that $10 billion of contingency. We have all of that, though, in the numbers that we use for the modeling of the project. So when people say, well, yeah, you've got a $43 billion project, but then you've got to expect cost overruns. We've already built this wedge cost overrun potential into the project. We think if we're successful in approaching an EPC contractor, will give us a set fee for major components here, and will take on some of that risk, that we would be able to potentially share a little bit of that $10 billion as a premium to them if they are expected to take on some of that risk, but to have a savings in that $10 billion chunk. So again, we're loading the full $43 billion into our modeling and cost calculations at this time, but we do think that there's some opportunity for savings going forward.
That's a quick question. What's EPC?
Engineering, procure, and construct. When you go to somebody and you basically say, you know, I want a warehouse. Would you give me a flat fee for a warehouse? They're going to do the final engineering, procurement of the parts, and construct. They're going to give you a flat fee, and if there's an overrun, they cover that overrun.
And this is just for these are just for the construction component, correct?
That's correct. It's being advanced under a concept of 75% of it would be debt financed, and 5% of it would be equity financed. And because you would expect a higher rate of return on your equity piece, on your debt financing piece.
And all that equity is in effect?
No, the equity could be a component, could be some of the customers. At this point, you know, that's an open question.
Are you all 3 trains right away, or are you going to phase them in?
We're in the numbers right now on a full build-out, so all 3 trains at once. We think that we've got an indication from the market that there's room for that capacity in the market. But for some reason, that total demand falls off at the beginning. We can't advance a 2-train concept. We think the numbers work for that. The one thing that you have to keep in consideration is that you can drop a train off of your gas treatment plant on the North Slope and have the LNG production off, just have 2 trains and 2 trains, but you don't want to undersize your pipeline. So you're all in on the 42-inch line right from the get-go. So there's extra cost then that gets spread on a smaller volume, and so you have to keep that in mind whether you're still able to clear the market price.
On the marketing, Russia just completing a mega LNG facility, Arctic Slope, on the Arctic Slope on the Arctic Ocean. They tanker it using icebreakers, tankers. They're going to Asia. They are planning a second mega LNG plant. How is it going to interfere, or will it interfere with the market in Asia that you pull? That market is China and Japan.
Certainly, any production that is strategically able to target the Asian market is a competitor, and they will be a strong competitor. I have some charts a little further on in the slide pack here, though, that show the expected growth of demand. And for the most part, we're counting on utilities in Asia are interested in a blended portfolio and don't want to put all their eggs in one basket. There's some geographic choke points. There's political considerations. And so we're just looking for an opportunity that resource can actually compete in that overall market as it expands.
Those signatures that were made, most of them were MOAs?
For Alaska, right. At this point, yes. MOUs, letters of intent. Right.
MOUs.
Yeah. This is the slides now that show the 3 things that we're trying to keep in balance. Of course, you've got resource owner interested in what price can they get for the commodity. You've got the customers, they've got a target price. You've got to be able to compete in the market in a certain range of price. And you've got financiers that are looking for, if they loan money, if they put equity dollars in, what's the expected return. And so we have to try and keep all these things in balance, put a system together in the middle that can satisfy all 3 of these market players. Just looking at the customer, in Asia right now are interested in receiving the commodity at a certain price or within a certain range of price. Right now, the supply out of the continental U.S. that comes out of the Gulf of Mexico is growing as far as potential supply, growing supply in the Asian market. And basically is your Henry Hub price for gas plus $5. The $5 gets you, you're at the plant, you get liquefied, you get loaded. That is the transportation via ship. It's the toll through the Panama Canal. And it's delivered to the Asian country. So that right now is roughly $8 per MCF of gas. If you're sourcing from a different source that actually sets a commodity price linked to oil, international price here, it's generally a percentage of oil. So the calculation here shows you 14% of a barrel of oil. And at the time that these numbers were run, Brent was trading at $63. So that's a delivered price of $7.57. So you see that, we're in that $7 to $8 price range. So as a basically price taker, we're not able to set the price. That is the leave the price now in the market and going forward in the market. Basically looking to see if we can deliver our commodity and compete at that price. A couple that help to play into that, one of them is our strategic location as far as competing against the U.S. Gulf. You can see, and when you actually take a look down on the top of the globe, you can see that we're basically 1/3 the distance from the U.S. Gulf Coast. We do not have to go through a choke point, a geographic choke point like the Panama Canal. And so basically our expected shipping price is 80 cents. So the market clearing price is $8. Our shipping price is 80 cents. That starts to give you an idea then of what we have to put together our infrastructure pieces for or at to meet that $7.20 price. To the financing now, looking for a source of financing that recognizes that what we're trying to put together here is basically a utility infrastructure. You know, it's no longer financing by the major oil companies, which when they deploy a capital dollar, they're really looking for a high rate of return. You know, that's the business that they're in. It's high risk and high return on the money that they invest. We believe that if we were actually putting together infrastructure that's more like a utility, that's based on long-term contracts that should be low risk, and therefore we're looking for sources of financing that have a lower rate of return that matches up with that lower risk. So see here, we are considering that as we go across the state of Alaska, we're, you know, our system operations and our PILT, that's a payment in lieu of taxes to municipalities that we cross with the pipeline infrastructure. We don't expect, even though it's a state entity, to be tax-free. There's impacts in those communities, and so for the long time, back to when the legislature first created legislation creating a state entity to advance a pipeline or participate in a pipeline, there's a pledge that there would be a PILT payment to local communities. Then you go down to the debt financing, sources of financing, 5%, you know, for the borrowed dollars, 5%. So that means on a 3-train build-out, the total debt service on a yearly basis is $3 billion. On equity, again, on the 3-train build-out, the 25% that would be equity dollars, we're looking at $1.1 billion per year. So you add the 3 components up, it gets you to a total cost, the financing and option of the infrastructure across the state of Alaska is $6.20. When you add those things up, you've got the $8 clearing price in the market, you've got 80 cents transportation via water, you need to deliver to Nikiski at $7.20. We think those components of operation and financing add up to $6.20, so it leaves $1 as a potential net back on the North Slope. Now, we've under a lot of criticism right now. You basically sort of reverse engineered this, and now going to go to the producers or the state of Alaska that also owns royalty molecules on the North Slope, and you're going to dictate to them that, well, we're going to give you $1, take it or leave it. Basically, it's up to the state of Alaska DNR to determine whether that's a fair price. It's up to the producers that have rights to production off of acreage, whether that's a fair price. But what we're trying to show is that for the infrastructure to actually deliver into this target market, they believe the market will bear without the infrastructure to actually deliver the commodity to the consumer. So again, what we're trying to do is keep all these 3 pieces in place, find the customers that, again, are attracted to at that delivered price in the Asian market, and a source of financing to build the infrastructure, an operating system at as low cost as possible, result in a price that is attractive to the resource producer.
Go through the prices there, and then back. Can you explain one more time? Just to go back, that what that profit would be on they sell.
The expectation of if you're going to clear and build the market, compete market, Asian market at $8, when you subtract your shipping, your liquefaction, your pipeline tariff, your tariff to go to gas treatment, we believe that's the value that remains for the producer of the resource.
For volume of gas.
For the full 23-chain build out.
Right.
So that's
$3
3 point.
You're going to get $1 back back, is that what we're,
I'm sorry?
I'm trying to figure out, you've got cost, you've got the price of gas cost, where is the net $1 coming from the actual molecules that are going through there? And if so, how many molecules in $1? That's what.
I looked on the 3-train build out, which I think is based on a $3.6 billion MCF per day production. And so that's the remaining value that a producer would get for an MCF of gas up on the slope.
That's where I was trying to figure out what.
It's per MCF of gas.
So that would be profit for the producer.
Would be the price paid. The producer has to look at the cost of producing that molecule on the North Slope. And of course, on North Slope, we've got different fields. The infrastructure largely been in place, most fully amortized. The gas comes up with oil every day. The gas separation is there. The gas treatment is not. So that's why the component here for treatment. And so can they sell a MCF of gas at $1 and still make a profit from Prudhoe Bay? Calculations will be different for, an MCF of gas from Thompson or from different fields. But it's basically that's the proposed price that is, if we're going to clear the market at $8 or supply the market at $8, that's left for a North Slope producer. And we're trying to keep all these things in balance. And so if financiers want more, then we make that up. We will continue to look for engineering solutions that bring down the overall capital cost. So your construction cost is lower. You're trying to finance less infrastructure, and that goes back to the initial slides. We've got a healthy slice in there for own management. We've got a slice in there for contingency. If we can crest those at all, it also relieves the pressure here, and perhaps makes a little bit more room for a producer to get on the North Slope. Yes.
I said net back. The question jumps out at me is net back to who?
That would be the price once you tracked all of the components to tip it to the customer. You're netting out, and that's the remaining price that you could pay a producer on the North Slope of gas.
That looks like it ought to be who'll wind up in charge build this thing, and you come to that $1 net back, and that's trying to figure out. Such a project, I suspect it's really hard to say who's in charge here.
Right now, the state of Alaska, the Alaska Gas Pipeline Development Corporation, is the entity that is in charge of advancing the project at this point. It will be the entity that constructs the project. We are in with large contractors, worldwide contractors right now. We will be looking ultimately for EPC contractors on the different components. The three large components are that gas treatment plant, the pipeline component, and then the liquefaction component. You've also, of course, construction of shipping. All of those components will be dealt with separately. Just to get back again to, actually we show for a long time we were looking at a range of price, particularly for the North Slope producer, between $1 and $2. Again, hope that we would be able to compress some of those price components so that we would be able to pay somebody up in the North Slope a little bit more than $1. But at this point, that's sort of the stress case. And will there be producers on the North Slope that are willing to sell the gas at that price?
Yeah, I just had one question. Now, there are three major companies up there, and one of them decides not to go with does that fill the whole deal, or can the other two negotiate?
It certainly becomes more difficult, and I certainly am not an expert on all of the production arrangements on the North Slope. They operate the field sort of as, a combined unit. It certainly becomes more difficult if, two of them are interested in selling, but the third one is not. They then have gas balancing, calculations that they have to go through. Certainly, we're looking at and counted on the resources in the combined North Bay area and something as being enough resource to basically fill this three-train, infrastructure for a period of time to amortize the financing, the debt.
Open season, what does cut off development for the rest of the state if there's no really open season, or if there's no volume in that pipeline, if it's filled up to capacity in open season frequently, or what?
The plan is actually designed to have more capacity than the LNG plant takes. There is extra capacity in the pipeline to triple the state's in-state use. So that capacity is there for
built in so that it doesn't delete the fact that other production may occur if other developments are found.
Yes. Your pipeline, the infrastructure lends itself to adding compression to get more gas down through the line.
The usual way of increasing volume.
Yeah. What AGDC is mindful of is that we actually are working on two different pipelines. The legislature gave us, a duty to advance what's called the ASAP line, the standalone pipeline. That's a smaller diameter pipeline, and right away goes from Prudhoe Bay down to Cook Inlet in the Mat-Su area. We aided the right-of-way work on that with the Corps of Engineers as the lead federal agency before the large pipeline started to advance. But when we get to DC, we have to explain to people one pipeline will be built. The way for the larger line is the same as the ASAP line. It's the same center line. It would just, if economics work for the larger pipeline, it'll just be a large pipe put in the ditch, not a second pipe put in the ditch. It would just be that 42-inch line. One of the things that we keep in mind, though, is the ASAP line was started when there was concern that Cook Inlet was going to be running short of gas. The state had this tremendous gas resource on the North Slope. Infrastructure had to be put in place for Alaskans to get access to that resource. So we know very much that that capacity satisfying the needs within the state of Alaska is paramount to Alaskans. We believe that ASAP line, or it's gas off of the larger pipeline, to supply that in-state need for residential customers, could be substantial savings on energy costs that would accrue to Alaskans if this infrastructure is put into place. And again, it gets back to that capacity of the components. For a 3 BCF pipeline, or a three train LNG facility, the pipeline is oversized to serve those liquefaction trains. So there is built-in capacity in the pipeline to serve state needs. That's all factored in.
So I've got a lot of questions, but this last one is just specific to this, and one is, at what point will you decide which one to go for? It seems to me that, at least from what you hear from the governor's office, that there's stronger interest in the AK LNG because of the export potential. And I think you need to stop spending money on two processes and two pipelines. What will be the determining factor in that? And then the other is, where does the $1,000 energy savings per household come in from?
The pipeline. Right now, the right of work that is being done on the ASAP line value, because again, it's the same right of way for the large lines. Basically, it's the market that would determine which of them gets built. Alaskans should be, in my opinion, focused on the largest line possible, because it's a volume enterprise. The higher the volume, the lower per unit price. The higher volume, the lower the per unit price delivered to a customer, the lower the per unit price delivered to customers in the state of Alaska. So if depending on what your focus is, if you're just Alaska consumer saying, okay, well, there's the jobs, there's the support for the state treasury, but what does it mean for me? higher you can get the volume, the lower the per unit price, get access to the resource. And the $1,000, I believe, is built on, and that's a number that Nick Simoniak has worked on. What would be the average benefit to a consumer on the pipeline right away? Now, in Senate Bill 138, which is the statute that directs the enterprise on the large pipeline, there was a requirement that a percentage of the potential profit be accounted for separately, and be made available to help with energy costs Alaska citizens who are outside of that pipeline right-of-way. Now, that will take further legislative action. They will actually have to account for those revenues separately and make appropriations to do that. But we know that if you are in a community that is close to the pipeline, there's a date that there be takes and access to the resource. The closer you are to the pipeline, the more you're going to be able to get access to that energy. Now, as far as what all goes into that average household savings, if you're an energy consumer in Fairbanks, Alaska, access to those that resource off the pipeline is going to mean a whole lot more to lowering my energy bill than for a Cook Inlet customer. Again, I believe what Nick did is he did an average of basically energy consumption or consumers up and down the rail belt.
And that's assuming once all the spurs are off of that and the facility to distribute it here in Fairbanks exists and the spur off of it, and then people also convert their heating systems to natural gas. So it might be a number that's eventually realized, but it will take from people a long time for that to actually happen.
Yeah, unless you're on the potential distribution system that Mr. Meeks is stepping in to take charge of, getting that structure in place ahead of actual availability of gas in a gaseous state off a pipeline. Yes.
One quick question. How long do they expect it to take to complete the line if it's approved?
And we're counting on a construction of 5 or 6 years.
I have a business question. Yep. Sorry to hog it, but that actually brought up another question. I was at the Northern Oil and Gas Research Forum back in October, I think it was, and there was a presentation on the sealift component of this project, and it seems so that there are interesting hurdles, and one seems quite large in the sealift component, which is to move the large tiers up to the North Slope for the gas facility there. And we spoke of these mods that would be built in Asia, and then very large vessels, because they're very large modules, would then go up to the North Slope, and talked about like 8, I think I have it written down here, but several, maybe up to 8 different seasons. And this armada would then meet in a port that yet exists, which is Port Clarence, or Point Clarence, or a deep water port, and then when the ice allows, and given the situation with ice now, that may be an end of season, but when the ice allows, and they would go as an armada around Prudhoe. I have the notes here that I'm not looking at, but how does that fact that the deep water port doesn't exist now for these vessels to stage, is that factored in, and how will that then affect the actual construction?
Well, the sea lifts for those components, probably on the North Slope, because you do have the issue of seasonality and when you can get access is crucial. So if we're targeting a 2024, 25, target for supplying the market, we have to start working backwards. That's why we do, if somebody has a very aggressive schedule, it is very aggressive because we do have that optimum time to try and supply into the market. That doesn't say that there isn't, wiggle room a little bit. Would a market, a customer wait a year if you thought it was going to take that long? We would hope. But there are these windows of opportunity that get the stuff moved up to the North Slope. We've dealt with that with the existing infrastructure up on the North Slope. Part of our application for permits on the project is the offloading on the slope, which part of the existing infrastructure has to be improved. Partial dredging around a spot for landing, strengthening of bridges then that would be used, on the existing infrastructure to get the modules in place. That's all part of the applications that we have pending with federal regulatory agencies now. To scoot along here, I'm going to run out of time. Just because it is this mega project, we are trying to look for ways of, thinking outside the box, changing things up, moving away from the proposal from the producers and the purchase financing and what it took to then clear the goals there. I'm always a little bit frustrated when people say, well, why is the state advancing this project? The producers walked away. It's not economic. It's not economic to return the expected rate of return if you are an exploration and production company. That return is very high. You've got to have enough money on your winners to cover the times where they go out and they drill a hole and they end up with nothing. That's a high venture. You would expect a higher rate of return. We could clear, the person determined that the market price, the expected market price, would not allow them to clear that hurdle. And so they basically said, it doesn't work for us under our concept for development. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other concepts. That's what the state's trying to advance. Last year, the chief economist for ConocoPhillips, she gives an update to the legislature once a year. And last year, as she did so, she covered the expected price for oil worldwide, what's happening to markets. And when she got to the end of her slide packet, she talked a little bit about what the state was trying to do, changing the economics of this gas delivery infrastructure. Actually started her comments and said, she actually was kind of enthused about what could take place under the state trying to advance the infrastructure, because the state doesn't have that high rate of return expectation. We could, approach different sorts of financing that have a much lower expectation of their rate of return on a dollar. And also the possibility that the state, for components of the infrastructure, could actually be determined to be tax exempt. And so when you take all of those things into consideration, it could be a game changer on this project. And that is the types of things that the state of Alaska is trying to bring to the project, to again lower the price of putting the infrastructure into place so that you can serve the market at the target price.
That's an interesting question. What would foreign investment expect out of it? What threshold do they want? Do they want cheaper gas, or do they want assured that they will have another source, like you explained earlier? Do they expect out of it if they were to be part owners?
Well, and that's a key component, and part of what was just announced in China brings together a customer looking for a certain price, and it brings in a Chinese entity that's a financier. So if the financier says, well, I'd like a higher price, that means the action raises the price to the customer. And the company that's serving the customer says, no, wait a minute, I want to keep that price down, so, shouldn't charge a little bit less in the interest. And so linking those two together, which was part of the announcement in Beijing.
It's going to be a lot dependent upon negotiations that take place ongoing, the dynamics involved here.
Absolutely. And what has been announced over the summer and the fall, and the big announcement in China is not a done deal. Nobody wrote billion-dollar checks. Nobody said, yes, put in the order for, hundreds of miles of pipe, but did lay out a plan to continue to negotiate in China, and I've got a slide here coming up, negotiating now with customer, financier, and a sovereign, infrastructure fund. And there's different expectations, of all of those. But we think by bringing them all together and reminding them that they're all serving the same, Chinese customer base or population base, that helps sort of maintain that balance, again, of, well, the financier would like to see a higher rate of return, but if they do that, that means the price to the customer that goes up.
Right.
And so it helps to keep those things in check.
Right. Thanks, Gene.
Okay. different way of looking at the infrastructure. You see from the lender, we're looking for 75% of the capital. We're doing basically with the announcement in China is we're pledging then 75% of the capacity of the infrastructure, not the ownership, the capacity of the infrastructure. And a lot of us have got misunderstood that and said, well, they're going to own 75% of this thing. We're going to be basically, at their beck and call because they own the infrastructure outright. That's the way that this is being proposed. Basically, they have capacity, and then the buyer basically then would be the lender. So if you've got a Chinese buyer, it's a Chinese lender, the buyer has access to 75% of that capacity is make their payments directly to the Chinese lender. They will pay them in Chinese dollars or whatever, so they avoid some calculations in doing so. And basically that would be for the 20-year period of time, proposed time for the financing. The equity owners, that's the 25% piece there, that is for the state of Alaska. Some of the customers may have a portion of the equity component. That 5% of the capacity is reserved to supply other markets. That could be, in Vietnam. It could be in Japan. It could be in Korea. Other countries that have stepped forward and indicated, an interest in the supply of this infrastructure, again, if the price is right. This is just showing where the global demand for LNG is. You can see here, China certainly is a big player. So why is it that the state of Alaska taking on the project? Really look to the Asian markets because that's where the demand is. It actually also is, lucky for us, that's also our backyard. We supply those markets without having to go through the Straits of Hormuz or the Panama Canal. We've been supplying the Asian market with LNG. Out of Nikiski, we supplied them for 40-plus years, very reliably. So just that's where the demand is, that's where our actual customer base is, and so that's where we looked for customers. A chart we've used for quite a while. We were asked to refresh it, and so I know that our marketing folks did that. This is the current contracts, blend contracts that supply the Asian market. A number of those contracts are going to start timing out and falling away. Some of the producers are never able to fill those contracts. Others, like Qatar, they certainly would like to be re-upped to continue contracts. We believe that the market is going to be looking for more of a blended portfolio, not putting all their eggs in one basket. So this is the web opportunity here that we're trying to compete for. And you can see our 3-train full build-out, that's this little hand-shaded bar, does bump the market. The expectation of growth, market opportunity because contracts are falling away, or to increase demand, open edge of opportunity that we believe our full 3-train build-out fits in there, doesn't overwhelm the market, doesn't mean that every other potential customer is chosen out of the market, but we believe that there's room if we can compete at that expected market clearing price.
Is the question falling away because of lack of capacity, worldwide capacity?
No,
falling away because of other reasons?
Some of it is just that long-term contracts are timing out.
They're up for renegotiation.
They're up for renegotiation, but the buyers now are looking for a blended portfolio. If you supply a utility base, I'm looking for, again, blended supply. When we had our LNG summit back in March, we actually invited companies that participate in the Asian market. One of them that I spoke to actually worked for an energy aggregator. And so just at a reception, I got into a conversation with him, and I said, well, there's all this talk about the market is changing. It's no longer long-term contracts. It's shorter term. You want to take advantage of the spot market. And so in your portfolio, because this enterprise was one that buys from different sources, aggregates the product, and then sells into the Asian market. I said, so in your portfolio, what percentage do you have to keep in longer-term contracts? He said, well, 25 to 35%. I said, and what is the length of that long-term contract? He's 20 years. So they want to take advantage of the spot market. If you're a utility, you don't want to go all in on the spot market because there could be a disruption, you know, in one of the choke points, Panama Canals, you know, Straits of Hormuz, or something else that disrupts something into that spot market. And because the overall market is growing, the surplus in the market is expected to get used up, you know, by the year 2021, and therefore then we expect the spot market price to start going up, and if the disruption in that market, the price could spike high really quickly.
Thanks.
Again, just a look at the overall growth and demand. Here on this slide shows all the LNG importation facilities that have been built along the coast of China over the last couple of years. So they are very serious in trying to change the fuel mix in their country, dealing with some of their pollution problems. Demand in China is gone up quickly than people have forecast. The expectations are that that is going to continue. A joint development agreement that was announced in China does involve AGDC, Sinopec, the Investment Corporation, that is a large sovereign wealth fund that is interested in making investments in infrastructure, energy infrastructure in particular, and Bank of China. And as I've mentioned before, the fact that we've got these 3 Chinese entities that are involved, we believe is key to trying to keep the balance between those 3 things, the producer, you know, the financiers, and the customer. Because Chinese enterprises are playing a couple different roles here, and there's hopefully a need for them to keep a balance among themselves because they're serving the Chinese population, and there's focus on price. There's also focus on return as they make investments, and hopefully those tension between those two or the enterprises help to keep that potential large market player in check. This is certainly the potential for them to participate in engineering and construction of some of the modules that will be shipped up. I know some people have talked about are we going to see an influx of, you know, Chinese workers that are going to be building, you know, the construction in the state of Alaska. I don't think that, I certainly know that AGDC is not contemplating that. The state of Alaska is not interested in that, neither is the U.S. government. But can components be sourced from Korea, Japan, China, just like have been on other infrastructure in the state of Alaska? Potentially, you would expect, though, the construction workers working in the state of Alaska to be Alaskan and U.S. citizens. Very large enterprise, world, you know, very high ranking with the Global 100 rankings. You can see they're number 3. Bank of China, the 4th largest bank in the world. And Investment Corporation, again, a very, very large enterprise fund, only behind Norway and Abu Dhabi. Again, just the different components. One of the active things in dealing with China is very large market demand. We're dealing with a single enterprise that is going to then sell to many different enterprises within China, but they have aggregated that demand, and we're dealing with, you know, one enterprise, Sinopec, as far as, you know, the price that's buying and then serving the customers. In addition, we've got 20% of the 25% of the capacity is there to serve other needs. We here this year signed a MOU with KOGAS, very large enterprise, utility enterprise in Korea. Announced the signing of a with Petro-Vietnam shortly after the China MOU or joint development agreement was signed, and we've since been in Tokyo, and there was about a week ago an announcement that Tokyo Gas also another very large country-owned utility enterprise signed a letter of intent. And we think that bodes well, again, for the land to be there to justify the three-lane build-out. Here are a number of things that just come into play. The equity funding, what's required, what's optional. In Senate Bill 138, the Gas Corporation was required to look for a way that Alaskan entities, municipalities, native corporations can invest in the infrastructure. So we have a means by which Alaskan entities can invest as equity investors in the enterprise. They don't have to. We just have an opportunity for them to. That's a requirement in Bill 138. And then we're looking for third parties, commercial banks, and hopefully play a big role there. We also have bonding capability at the corporation. So we're looking at bringing all those things together, again, be able to finance investment in the enterprise. Again, our focus is on China because that is where the overall growth and demand is. At the House Resource Committee, one of the representatives asked our President, Keith Meyer, we sat with him that we would be trying to broker a deal, such a large deal with China. Actually, for myself, as an Alaskan, I am fine with that. Certainly when I realize that we sell most of our fish to China, I believe personally for myself, it is the U.S. government's responsibility to determine which countries it's appropriate to trade with. The U.S. Department of Commerce earlier this year announced an effort to really increase energy export to Asian countries, and China was mentioned specifically in that. So if the U.S. is open to trade energy of Asian countries, natural market for Alaska, I'd rather Alaska be in there competing for a share of it. If not, Texas is more than happy to take up that capacity if we leave it unanswered. And then up here, more looking down on the top of the globe, give an idea just geographically, the benefit of serving this A market out of Alaska versus the Gulf of Mexico, which is our large U.S. competitor, which has to go through the Panama Canal.
That you should use the whole president.
That's what I included in everyone. And this just looks at, Chinese demand for all kinds of different raw products, energy, all of that. Click through all of these. One of the groups from an Asian potential buyer, I was quite surprised at the turnout that we had at the LNG conference that we had in March. That then kicked off a series of meetings all through the summer and fall, and even very recently, those potential customers sending, technical teams over here to understand the infrastructure that we're proposing, to get up on North Slope to see the infrastructure that's in place right now. And the bottom picture here, we look at the North Slope again, all of the infrastructure already in place with 9 BCF of gas coming out of the ground every day and being injected. So there's very little resource risk as far as the amount of gas that's needed to underpin the 20 years that we're proposing that the infrastructure be financed over. You've got enough gas that the molecules have come to the surface a couple of times and been reacted and put back into the ground. There really is no commodity risk certainly for the BCF build out for the period of time that the infrastructure would be financed over.
Question.
Yes.
What impact might this have on oil production on the slope if you're not re-injecting that gas?
That's a crucial question and actually it's been answered. The Alaska Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, which has the duty to make sure that the hydrocarbon molecules in the state of Alaska are maximized when they're produced, determined in 2015 that it was time to take some of that resource off the North Slope. their entity that determined that the 3.6 BCF per day was the quantity that could be taken off without jeopardizing or without losing more value on the oil side than you potentially gain on the gas side. In fact, and I've known for quite a while, having asked one of the state directors for the oil and gas division of oil and gas back in 2012 or so, at what point would get to the point that the circling the molecules on the North Slope to consume more of the value of that hard hydrocarbon than you get if you took those molecules to market. AGDC basically in 2015 answered the question and said, we're at the point now that we need to start considering, this to take some of those molecules to market. The equivalent of the AGDC just actually passed a resolution recently, basically to bring the state's enterprise that in fact it was time to take some of those molecules off to market. The regulatory side, actually here are the crates of papers that were delivered to FERC. I mentioned earlier that on the ASEP line, the lead federal agency is the Corps of Engineers. So we have been advancing the permitting on right-of-way for that pipeline, the smaller pipeline with the Corps of Engineers. Because there is an LNG component on the large line, then FERC is the lead agency. This was the application that was turned into FERC in April of the year. We continue to respond to questions that they have posed to us, and we continue to pressure them to publish a NEPA schedule. Our proposal to them is that, yes, we understand you have profits and questions to us. We need to get you answers to those questions. We don't believe, though, you have to have answers to all of those questions before you publish a NEPA schedule. You can publish a NEPA schedule and say in month 3, expecting you to deliver all the questions or to all the questions dealing with whether the pipeline should be elevated or not, or what you're going to do to mitigate a certain thing. And if we miss those deadlines in your published NEPA schedule, the slippage in the schedule is our fault. We are really pushing full force on the federal, all of the federal agencies and the administration to encourage FERC to actually push the NEPA schedule, give us an idea of how long this overall process is going to take. On the Corps of Engineers side, we believe that the Corps of Engineers is going to start really soon. Their final EIS on our supplemental EIS so that we can get to a record of decision on the right-of-way. Again, that right-of-way would be the same right-of-way that would be used for a larger pipeline. It would, however, have the Cook Inlet Crossing and the LNG plant in Kiski added to it.
Cook Inlet will be a major issue, I imagine.
We're working with the different federal agencies that have oversight on the proposed crossing there, and have had very good meetings with them coming through the summer and the fall. We were encouraged by the Trump administration to apply for what's called Fast 41 designation. That is, a enterprise within the federal government that hopefully then brings a more streamlined process to your permitting. We're asking them to help us to encourage FERC to, get that schedule published and then keep to that schedule. The suggestion from the White House, we make that application. We did qualify, and so we hope that helps us with the permitting process. We're with the congressional delegation. We know that Senator Drukowski has proposed legislation in the past that would help us with the little bit of the Denali Park, National Park that we would need to cross. The Park Service is very interested in getting access to the gas for a clean source of energy in that area, so we'd think that helps us there. And so we will continue to work that. We work with the White House and also through the interaction in the Asian market, certainly interaction with the President's team on his recent trip. We've made some very good connections in the White House. They're knowledgeable about the project. let's see, here is the projected timeline. As far as moving forward, we would like, you know, an 18-month period for the to get to their record of decision, so that we would have that in February of 2019. We understand that that's very aggressive, but until they tell us otherwise, we're going to push to advance the project as much as possible. And finally, here is a slide. We were criticized, even though all of our budgetary information provided to our board on a monthly basis was available publicly. Letters, we were not including that in our briefing information and the paper that we delivered to them, their offices, every 2 weeks. So we have started including this, and shows us resources that we have, you know, how much we have left over. In 2016, you can see here we had a combined $106 million. You know, here's our spend coming through to October of 2017, and our projected spend going forward. It's a very expensive operation. It's a very large project, but if we hope to advance this to a final investment decision, the state's taken up the charge. We have been appropriated previously the money to advance the project, and this is how we propose to spread those monies over time to keep the enterprise going forward. That's it.
I understand that China's primary energy with coal, and we can send them as much natural gas as we possibly can. What effect have on air quality in China, and how many millions of tons of CO2 will that keep out of the atmosphere, or other particulates that are greenhouse gases?
Yeah. Sure, that's just straight math. You know, if we took the 75% of the capacity, if they actually did take 75% of that, we could do a quick calculation. I don't have that number, but a quick calculation, if all of that offset coal, what would the benefit be? We don't know if some of it's going to offset, you know, diesel or other fuels, but there is a major push in China. There is a lot of pressure from their developing middle class that they appreciate the economic activity, you know, obviously that provides to them, but they've got a growing concern over environmental issues. And recently, our president, Keith Meyer, was approached by a representative of one of the major fishing national entities in the U.S. and said, you know, there was benefit because if you look at ocean impacts in Alaska, as you go out the ocean chain, the impacts from, you know, pollution comes from Asian economic activity increase as you go out the chain. And I know from when I worked at Golden Valley, there was concern about, you know, the coal plants that generate power for Golden Valley just on the outside of Denali Park, and the measurement of mercury in Denali National Park. Well, our coal at UCLA is very low mercury. So the question, well, where's that coming from? It's coming from overseas sources.
Do you have a projection on what the cost of gas would be delivered to Fairbanks, and how it compares to, say, what's going to be provided through the energy project?
That have been used before, and Nick Simoniak, when he comes to present, will have a much more refined number. A lot depends on whether it's a 3-train, or 2-train model. Numbers I've seen before have been $6 per MCF. Now that gas coming to the community in a given state, so you have, the expense of regassing it to put it into your distribution system.
That's at the gate.
I believe that's at the gate. Now, I know if that's just the offtake of the pipeline or if that's delivered to the community. So that's would be a good question for Nick.
Yeah, that lets you cut a lot of those numbers in half, closer there. So.
Yeah. So tremendous potential benefit for interior Alaska. And then, getting back to that projected $1,000 per household savings, I think that was an average up and down the belt. You would expect that there would be a lot less of a savings in Anchorage. The heat degree days are lower there, so their consumption of energy is lower. The availability of their gas price is lower. And so I think those savings would actually be slanted.
Back, so what's the current projection in the Interior Energy Project? How does it compare to that $6?
As demand goes up, from perspective, we think that about $11 per MCF delivered into the community, and then you have your storage, regas, and delivery that adds on $5. That's why, in our view, we believe once we get to relatively increase in demand, we get down into the $15 range. That's 50% expectation of conversion over time. IGU was more conservative. They did 35% expectation of, and they got to like in the $17 range. So that distribution, again, your storage, regas, and distribution cost is about $4 or $5. The delivery is around $12. Right, David? Expectation was about $11. So this would be in a gaseous state, potentially at $6.
$10 cheaper.
Well, that's before you have your distribution costs.
Right. That's so $4 or $5 cheaper. Even that is more sensitive to conversion.
Yeah, that certainly would give the enterprise a shot in the arm as far as attractiveness to the consumer, and consumers will want to hook up. That lowers the overprice so that you can reach out with your system to more consumers. So, I mean, there's a lot of speculation in what ultimately the price would be for it.
So would it be fair to say $4 to $5 cheaper than the Interior Energy Project projects being able to?
I would think easily $5 cheaper.
Yeah, it gets the price of LNG down, it's going to start their development in a lot of India. I mean, we're talking about customers now, but there are customers such as International Tower Hill. The line deposit for 9 Mile, if the price is low enough, that will enable them to go ahead and make cement or limestone. There's the Amber project up north. Lower energy prices are going to make that project more feasible. So, if this project goes, it will benefit Alaska and put jobs and improve our economy.
Yeah, and certainly many of those entities that Roger mentioned periodically come to the IEP for an update. They come to AGDC Corporation for an update. They're very interested in that energy, not only because is it a competitive price? What does it do for their permitting as far as emissions? Lower emissions helps permitting too. So they're very, very interested in that. Going back to, we generally remind the White House that the bullish things that they've said. Secretary Zinke about energy in Alaska. Alaska is open for development. They want to get more federal acreage leased out for potential oil and gas development on the North Slope. Right now, if you find gas, you have no way of getting that to market. So we remind them that if they're to be successful in that enterprise, we're putting the infrastructure for them to be successful. As far as the country being energy self-reliant or potentially being an energy player on the world market, according to Secretary Zinke, you can't do it without the state of Alaska. You can't do all of that without this infrastructure. And so we remind them of the benefit to the country and the role that they would like to see the country play in world markets, but we remind them that this infrastructure to achieve all those things really opens up a lot of opportunity in Alaska for mineral development and all kinds of things.
These slides be available?
Yes.
Wonderful.
On our website.
Good.
Carl?
So follow on to Roger and your comments in regards to entities coming to IGU, when we were seeing the process for getting gas here, Jeff Cook, Petroleum, still around, Hills, and I'm assuming Petrostar, they developed, or they have processed gas or liquid to put into their burners to process the gas, fuel, the diesel and all that stuff. So the issues is getting gas to petroleum refineries. Petrostar came to you indicating any nations that they're interested in getting gas for their process?
Well, I mentioned Roger, I said some of those companies may have approached us and under confidentiality, they don't necessarily want to put that they're shopping for an alternative energy resource, but certainly refining, and we know at the time, Flint Hills was interested in potentially partnering in a project because they could burn their own product
Correct.
to the
And they're one,
refinery.
they were one
And
of
across the nation, refineries run on natural gas. In the refinery, Tesoro's refinery runs on natural gas. They don't burn.
and we were a minority here, so.
We're very much a minority.
Nothing from Petrostar.
That's Petrostar.
They don't say anything.
Frank, you mentioned that the routing to go to Nikiski was predominantly originally motivated by the rumored shortage of gas for Anchorage.
Well, that's passage of what was House Bill 104, which started the state down in advancing the ASAP line, the Alaska Standalone Pipeline, and it was to go to the Cook Inlet region.
Is my understanding that Nikiski being in Cook Inlet is not available for large ocean-going tankers. And from the get-go, would these be a better port, follow the oil pipeline route, or paralleling that? And if we don't have the drive to supply gas to Anchorage, have they reconsidered going to Valdez? How would that impact this Chinese situation?
I don't know that the market or the potential customers particularly care where the infrastructure is, but they're focused on the price. I tell you this, if we were to switch the route, it would put us years behind on this project. At this point, the price is being advanced with the proposal to go to Nikiski. And right off of, I think, right at the loading berth of the existing Conoco plant, the water depth is 50 feet plus.
They surveyed that will, from Nikiski clear on off, they've actually surveyed a route, a large vessel.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. My understanding, there's no problem with bringing the.
No, they've actually surveyed a route out.
Okay, that was an old rumor that I picked up. Got to update my information. Thank you.
Right.
So, presentation, thank you very much. And I understand that ASAP is the backup plan. But if you were just to build a smaller diameter ASAP line, how much does that pipeline cost?
Why? I believe I've seen the number of about $10 to $12 billion, I think. Please take it with a grain of salt. I should have reviewed the information. And there is that you don't have a volume that you're.
Got that.
So the compression is less, and
It's going to
but I
cost
think
a lot less.
but I think it's still a 32-inch line.
Oh, is it so that big on that thing?
I think the Fairbanks is that's the circuit website, this is more diameter.
Yeah.
Picture, because I looked through the SCIS.
Just a quick point of clarification. So, construction goes, 75% of capacity for roughly 20 years. And in the model, it is 0 line after that, 75% capacity comes back to the state, so they're generating from
Well, there's a couple things, and yeah, we used to have some slides that really showed that revenue to the state. It gets revenue from the sale of its royalty molecules, and if the state is the owner of the infrastructure, the state will get the revenue from the operation of the transportation.
75% capacity with throughput would still be basically the big three or whoever's putting gas in there, there'd be a tariff for transportation, those molecules. Their molecules that they own versus a service charge for transport. State of life.
Yeah. So, there's expectation at $1 an MCF.
Right.
That there is revenue from the sale of the resource of about $1 billion a year. The state would be, a portion of that.
About
Okay.
royalty money.
The royalty. And so that money comes to the state treasury. Then the enterprise is generating tolls on the gas conditioning plant, the operation of the pipeline, and the operation of the LNG plant. Those tolls generate about $5 billion a year. Of that, you saw the financing was $3.5 billion a year. And that was the financing, the PILT payment, all of that. So that leaves $1 billion, north of $1 billion per year after you've paid your financing, basically. Once you get to the end of the 20 years and you're off, now you can either lower your tolls if that's what you need to do to stay competitive in the market, or now you've got an enterprise that just has more free cash flow. It's no different than, if I bill and charge rent, but I've got a mortgage payment, that's eating up most of my rent until I get to that payoff, and the free cash flow on that enterprise goes up.
But the state still is in the field of the pipeline.
Yes. In all of these scenarios, the state maintains control of the infrastructure. Ultimately, what percentage of its equity, that's in flux, but in no way is the state interested in losing control of the infrastructure.
Is there to the rumor that the pipe will be made with Chinese steel?
I have not heard.
That's really a
I have not heard. I know we right now, the Pipeline Corporation are looking at mill capacities in the U.S. Who produces the steel? Who's got the capacity to roll the steel? Is it a U.S. company? Is it a foreign company that has a U.S. plant? I mean, we're looking at all of that.
I thought I get it on Amazon, but free shipping.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, from delivery on the North Slope.
By drones.
Yeah.
I draw. Can you use any Chinese-speaking Americans on your company?
Well, depending on how things advance, there might be that
I'm
opportunity.
serious. Yeah. But what are the opportunities for young people who speak Chinese?
If that's where the market goes, there could be that opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Gene. Appreciate it. And
Very
then
good, Gene.
next week we're hearing from Kurt Parkin with Donlin Gold. He'll be sharing. And then the week after that is Christmas. The week after that, Nick Simoniak will be sharing.
Oh, great. Good.
January 2nd.